With a tariff deadline set by U.S. President Donald Trump fast approaching, Canadian industries are bracing for impact as Ottawa races to salvage talks with Washington. Trump has opened a fierce new front in his trade battles, this time squarely aimed at Canada. In a blunt letter to Prime Minister Mark Carney, posted publicly online, he declared that starting August 1st, the U.S. would impose a sweeping 35% tariff on Canadian exports. The announcement hit like a thunderclap across North America, shaking financial markets and boardrooms alike. Ottawa responded within hours, unveiling dollar-for-dollar countermeasures. The result? A retaliatory spiral without precedent in U.S.-Canada relations, placing $22 billion worth of goods directly in the line of fire. The fallout was immediate. Entire industries, autos, beverages, construction materials, found themselves entangled in the tariff storm. Even the humble soda can became a casualty. More strategically, Washington may have undercut its own electric vehicle ambitions, given Canada's role as a critical supplier of aluminum, battery metals, and precision parts. Trump's opening strike was decisive, raising tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum to 50%, a direct hit on the backbone of Canada's industrial exports. Ottawa countered within 48 hours, levying matching 50% tariffs on a wide basket of U.S. goods, from EV motors and pickup frames to the aluminum sheets used in packaging. Overnight, cross-border supply chains, built over decades, were jolted by soaring costs, leaving both economies exposed to economic aftershocks. The impact was immediate. American manufacturers awoke to find costs surging overnight. Few realize just how deeply integrated these supply chains are. Nearly 90% of steel used in U.S. factories comes from Canada, while Canadian smelters supply roughly half of all aluminum consumed in America. At the same time, Canada buys about 20% of U.S. steel exports. This mutual dependence means a tariff imposed on one side ricochets instantly onto the other. Markets reacted within days. Prices for core industrial inputs spiked to levels not seen in years. The Midwest Cold Rolled Steel Index, a benchmark for auto frames and home appliances, jumped $60 per short ton, matching highs last touched in mid-2022. Aluminum followed suit. The Midwest Aluminum Premium, which sets costs for everything from EV battery housings to beer cans, surged nearly 54% in less than a week. By early June, aluminum was trading at 58 cents per pound, or roughly $1,270 per ton, an 8-month high. Analysts warned this was only the first wave, with forecasts suggesting prices could climb towards 70 cents per pound once tariffs fully ripple through the supply chain. For manufacturers, it was like trying to build on shifting ground. Consumers, too, began to feel the squeeze almost instantly. The packaging sector, especially aluminum can production, sounded alarms. Industry giants like Ball Corporation, Crown Holdings, and Modelo warned that soaring costs on imported aluminum cans were cascading directly into beverage prices. Compounding the pressure, Canada added a 25% surcharge on certain finished goods, meaning American-made cans carried punishing new costs. Within just 3 days, the price of a standard aluminum can jumped by double-digit percentages. Beverage companies hinted they would cancel summer promotions as margins evaporated. For shoppers, the message was clear. Tariff-driven inflation was about to land directly on grocery store shelves. For the sharpest impact, look to Detroit. The auto sector, the backbone of North American manufacturing, absorbed a direct blow. Tariffs on steel and aluminum struck assembly lines at their core. Ford Motor Company admitted its recently negotiated labor contract had already added roughly $850 per vehicle in production costs, especially on its high-margin F-Series pickups. That was before the tariff shock. With raw material costs now surging by 50%, the economics of building cars and trucks flipped overnight. Automakers were forced into a dilemma: absorb the costs or pass them to buyers. Neither path offered relief. A J.D. Power analysis on April 23rd highlighted that automakers could not simply shift the full burden onto consumers without crippling demand. The study projected manufacturers would likely be compelled to absorb about 70% of the increase themselves, slicing into already thin margins to keep vehicles competitively priced. Industry giants, Ford, GM, Tesla, now face the prospect of shrinking profitability just to prevent vehicles from becoming unattainable. Yet even with efforts to shield buyers, analysts warned of an inevitable tipping point. If tariffs persisted, higher sticker prices across showroom floors were not a question of if, but when. Anderson Economic Group put hard numbers on the consumer impact. Their estimate, over $30 billion in added costs in just the first year, driven by higher vehicle and parts prices. For pickup trucks alone, the burden could climb as high as $8,000 per unit once tariff-related inputs are factored in. By contrast, Ottawa's initial modeling suggested raw material tariffs would add only about $850 Canadian dollars per vehicle, a fraction of what now looms over U.S. buyers. Whether absorbed through razor-thin margins or passed along in higher sticker prices, the auto sector found itself under severe pressure. The irony is stark. Washington's tariff offensive was designed to shield U.S. manufacturing and secure its industrial base. Yet in practice, it risks undercutting America's own electric vehicle ambitions. EV supply chains are highly globalized, dependent on specialized motors, advanced battery materials, and precision components that cross borders repeatedly. Canada plays a central role in this ecosystem. Overnight, Canadian-built EV motors were hit with steep tariffs, their market price climbing nearly 12% in just 3 trading sessions. Battery inputs too, such as aluminum-coated foils and copper separator films, saw sudden cost spikes. Samsung SDI, which operates major battery plants in Indiana and Michigan, quietly warned that tariffs were driving up material expenses at a pace that threatened production plans. The timing could not be worse. Washington's $7,500 federal EV tax credit was crafted to make electric cars more affordable and accelerate adoption. Yet with tariffs inflating the cost of core materials, that incentive risks being erased before reaching consumers. In practice, trade policy is threatening to neutralize America's own clean energy subsidies, pushing EV prices higher rather than lower. Within a week, the fallout was unmistakable. Raw material costs at multi-year highs, supply chains in disarray, and automakers forced into urgent recalculations. Analysts began calling it the $22 billion earthquake, a reference to the scale of Canada's retaliation. The pressing question, was this merely the opening shock, or the first wave of a larger disruption that could undermine the EV industry, the linchpin of America's green transition? Prime Minister Mark Carney chose not to stay on defense. Canada's counterstrike was both economic and strategic. His message carried 2 layers. Respond decisively while highlighting Canada's cleaner, greener industrial base. Carney quickly dismissed Washington's rationale, national security, as a flimsy shield for protectionism. Then, instead of simply retaliating, he began repositioning the contest itself, framing Canada as a partner in low-carbon supply chains and sustainable manufacturing. The standoff over Greenland, tariffs, and Canada's rising leverage is more than a fleeting headline. It underscores just how fragile modern alliances have become, and how quickly diplomacy can fracture when national pride collides with economic power. Thank you for watching. If you found this analysis valuable, be sure to subscribe to Traveling Vibes and enable notifications for our next deep dive into the global forces reshaping our world. Until then, stay informed and stay curious.